January of 2025, the rescue service of the Italian Alps encountered a phenomenon that has not yet been explained. Within a radius of 800 meters of the southern wall of the Carre Alto mountain, all navigation devices began to malfunction. GPS coordinates were off by 200 and 300 meters from their actual position. Compasses were off by 15 to 20 degrees from true north. The radios were picking up interference, the source of which could not be identified. The anomaly had clear boundaries, as if an invisible sphere covered a certain area of the alpine slope. Outside this zone, the equipment worked normally. Inside it, the rescuers lost contact with the coordination center and wandered, relying only on visual reference points and their own experience. It was in the center of this dead zone that 2 British tourists disappeared. The search for them stretched for 5 months and left more questions than answers. Samuel Harris and Aziz Ziriat were the kind of Londoners for whom the mountains meant more than a holiday. 35-year-old Harris worked in technology, startups, and had experience climbing in Scotland and Wales. His friend Aziz Ziriat, 36, worked for the Palace for Life charity of Crystal Palace Football Club. Colleagues knew him as the man who disappeared for weekends into the wilds of Europe and returned with photographs of snow-capped peaks and tales of camping in -20. The friends regularly went hiking out of range, as they called it themselves. Their rucksacks contained modern equipment, the latest generation of satellite communicators, GPS navigators with autonomy of up to 200 hours, avalanche sensors, emergency beacons. They never relied on luck or intuition alone. Each route was planned months in advance, studied using satellite images, checked against other tourists' reports. The Dolomite Alps in northern Italy were their choice for New Year holidays. This region attracted with its combination of relative accessibility and real wildness. In winter, you could walk days here without meeting a single person. The route involved passages between mountain huts, the so-called refugi, with possible self-contained campsites in deserted valleys. The last civilized point was to be the hut of Casina d'Osson, situated at an altitude of 2,000 meters above sea level, near the town of Tione di Trento. From here, it was planned to make a radial trek to the group of peaks in the Carre Alto area, returning by the 4th-5th of January and leaving for the airport by the 6th. The Corpo Nazionale Soccorso Alpino knew such tourists well. Experienced, well-trained, and well-equipped, they disappeared into the mountains for a week or two and always returned at the appointed time. They were called professional hermits. When such people disappear, it means that something serious has happened. The rescuers remembered cases when similar groups were caught in avalanches or fell off cliffs. But the bodies and equipment were found quickly, within a few days. The geography of their routes was predictable, and tracks were easy to read. What happened to Harris and Ziriat did not fit into the usual statistics of alpine tragedies. On the 1st of January, 2025, around noon local time, Aziz Ziriat sent a message to his friend Rebecca Dimmick in London. The text looked like the usual tourist bulletin, admiring the scenery, complaining about the heaviness of his rucksack, telling her about dragging a log up the mountain for a fire in the hut. Just dragged a big log up the slope. Harris laughs, says I'm hauling half the wood. But it's going to be a great fire. The view from here is incredible. The mountains go all the way to the horizon. Tomorrow we plan to climb higher, to the base of Carre Alto. The batteries may be dead soon, so don't worry if there's no communication for 2 or 3 days. The last phrase sounded like the usual warning of an experienced traveler. Friends and relatives knew this peculiarity of Aziz. He always warned about possible interruptions in communication so that no one would worry in vain. In the Palace for Life offices in London, Colleagues even joked that Ziriat disappeared into the mountains more regularly than his salaries came in. The weather conditions at the time looked favorable. The weather stations in the Trento Valley recorded a temperature of -8 to 10 degrees Celsius, with a northwesterly wind of no more than 15 kilometers per hour. Cloud cover was variable, with no signs of impending precipitation. Visibility was assessed as good. Avalanche danger was kept at the second level, out of 5 possible. For experienced climbers, these were almost ideal conditions. January can be capricious in the Dolomites. Clear skies in the morning, fog in the afternoon, blizzard in the evening. But the forecast promised stability for the next 3 days. Harris and Ziriat had time to spare. Their flight to London was scheduled for the 6th of January at 3:30 in the afternoon. It would take 4 hours by car to get to Marco Polo Airport in Venice, with another hour to check in. This meant that they had to be down in the valley by the 4th-5th of January. Given their experience and fitness, the time margin was more than adequate. Relatives in London received Aziz's message during the New Year holidays. Rebecca Dimmock later recalled that the text seemed quite ordinary, even banal. Aziz always wrote about the heaviness of the rucksack and the beauty of the mountains. The only detail that sticks in the memory is his admiration for the view from Casina Dawson's hut. "The mountains go all the way to the horizon," he repeated twice in one paragraph, which was uncharacteristic of him. The Harris family was also not troubled. Sam regularly went camping and always returned at the appointed time. His punctuality became a family legend. He could be late at the office, late for a meeting with friends, but he never missed a deadline for returning from the mountains. 2 seats for the Venice-London flight remained reserved at the airline's reservation service. At the hotel in Trento, where the travelers had left some of their belongings, the receptionist marked their return on the 4th. Everything seemed so smooth and predictable that the alarm raised on the 6th of January took everyone by surprise. No one could have guessed that the usual report of a log for the fire would be the last contact with the outside world. That the weather conditions, which seemed favorable, concealed something that had no name in the mountaineers' handbooks, and that in the neighborhood of Cara Alto awaited them a zone where the usual laws of navigation ceased to work. What happened after the 1st of January? Why did 2 experienced hikers with state-of-the-art equipment suddenly disappear in relatively calm conditions? And what role did a mysterious anomaly in the Cara Alto area play in their disappearance? On the 6th of January, 2025, at 14:30 local time, at Marco Polo Airport in Venice, 2 passengers failed to show up at the check-in counter for a flight to London. The airline staff waited until the last moment, but seats A23 and A24 remained empty. At 15:40, the plane took off without Samuel Harris and Aziz Ziriat. It was not the relatives who first became concerned, but the hotel receptionist in Trento. By the evening of the 6th day, it was clear that the tourists had not returned for the things they had left in their room. Their traveling bags, documents, spare clothes, and tickets home lay untouched. This was the first red flag. Experienced travelers never leave their passports and airline tickets at a hotel if there is even a minimal risk of not returning on time. By midnight, the information reached Rebecca Dimmock in London. She immediately contacted Harris's family. By the morning of the 7th of January, relatives and friends were already buying tickets to Italy. At the same time, an official request for help was made to the Corpo Nazionale Soccorso Alpino. For the rescue service, the disappearance of 2 trained hikers in relatively calm weather prompted an immediate mobilization. At 7 o'clock on the morning of the 7th of January, a team of 12 rescuers, led by Marco Bellini, a 20-year veteran of alpine operations, moved to the hut of Casina Dawson. Bellini later recalled that from the very beginning, the operation looked unconventional. Usually, missing hikers leave a clear trail, testimonies of other climbers, entries and hut logs, traces of campsites. In the case of the British, there was no such trail. The last reliable information was from the 1st of January, when Ziriat sent a message about a fire in a log. The first oddity was detected while still on the ascent to Casina Doson. At an altitude of about 1,800 meters, about 3 kilometers from their proposed search area, the rescuers' GPS navigators began to show inaccurate coordinates. At first, this was blamed on the effect of the terrain. High cliffs can block satellite signals. But as we approached the southern wall of Car Alto, the deviations became more and more noticeable. At an altitude of 2,000 meters, within a radius of about 800 meters from the base of the rock wall, all electronic instruments began to work erratically. The GPS was showing a position with a deviation of 200 and 300 meters. The compasses were off by 15 to 20 degrees from true north. Marco Bellini suspended the group to check the equipment. All instruments were in good working order and the batteries were charged. Outside this area, the equipment was working properly. As soon as they returned, 500 and 600 meters down the slope, the readings returned to normal. The rescuers had never seen such an effect in their years of work in the Dolomites. The anomaly zone was roughly circular in shape. Its center was at the foot of the southern wall of Caralto, where the rock massif turned into a gentle slope covered with snow. The boundaries were clear enough. A step to the left or right, and the GPS started showing the correct coordinates. Radio communication within the zone was also intermittent. Voices were distorted and there was interference of unclear origin. Communication with the base in the valley was interrupted every few minutes. The rescuers were forced to maintain contact by going outside the anomaly. The nature of this phenomenon remained unclear. There was no mention of magnetic anomalies in the area of Car Alto in the geological guides of the Dolomites. Local guides, contacted by radio, claimed that they had never encountered such technical problems. On the 8th January, the second day of the search, an event occurred that turned a technical mystery into something more sinister. Around noon, one of the rescuers, Luca Rossi, working on the northern border of the anomalous zone, caught a faint mobile phone signal. The signal was intermittent, but strong enough to give an approximate direction. It was coming from the center of the technical failure zone, from the very area where the electronic equipment was least stable. It seemed like a paradox. In an area where satellite navigation was failing, a mobile phone was somehow transmitting a signal. Bellini's group changed direction, orientated towards the source of the signal. They had to move almost blindly, relying on visual landmarks and the compass, which continued to show the wrong direction. The snow cover in the area was 1.5 meters deep, which significantly slowed down the progress. At about 14:30, the group found an area where the snow was denser, as if there was something large underneath. Excavation began. Half an hour later, the body of Samuel Harris was found under a layer of snow about 1.20 meters thick. The first thing that struck the rescuers was the condition of the clothes. In a supposed fall from a height of 50 to 60 meters, which corresponded to the height of the nearest rock wall, the jacket and trousers should have been seriously damaged. Instead, the clothes were virtually intact, only lightly stained with earth. Absent were the typical injuries that a fall on the rocks leaves behind: broken limbs, head injuries, soft tissue lacerations. The body looked like Harris just laid down in the snow and didn't wake up. This picture didn't fit any of the scenarios the rescuers were considering. Near the body, 30 meters to the northeast, Harris's rucksack was found. It was lying neatly closed, with no signs of falling or damage. Inside were personal belongings, food, and some climbing equipment. Everything was packed as if the hiker was preparing for a planned stopover. The most mysterious find was a note in Harris's jacket pocket, written in his handwriting on a sheet of notebook paper. It contained the coordinates: 46 Kuret 47 north latitude, 11.09 23 east longitude. On inspection, it was found that these coordinates pointed to a point 2 kilometers north of where the body had been found, in an area that had not yet been surveyed. The note was dry despite the body lying under the snow. The paper showed no signs of prolonged exposure to moisture or frost. This suggested that it had been written shortly before death or had been protected from the weather in some way. The coordinates were recorded to the 4th decimal place, which corresponds to an error of several meters. Such accuracy is typical for professional GPS devices, but strange for a note made in extreme conditions. Usually people write down coordinates to the nearest minute, or at most, to the 1st decimal place. Marco Bellini decided to immediately send the group to the specified coordinates. However, it turned out that the point was located in an inaccessible area on the opposite slope of the mountain range. To get there required a detour of several kilometers, or a technically difficult traverse of a rock wall. While Bellini's team organized a route to the new point, Harris's body was evacuated by helicopter. The official medical report classified the death as the result of hypothermia, possibly after a fall, but the details of the discovery site and the condition of the body did not fit this version. By the evening of the 8th of January, it was clear that the operation to find Aziz Ziriat would require considerably more time and resources than originally anticipated. The mysterious coordinates from Harris's note opened up a new direction for the search, but also raised many questions. Why did Harris write down these particular coordinates? What is located at that point? And most importantly, where is Aziz Ziriat, of whom no trace or personal belongings have been found? What is hidden at the point whose coordinates were found in Harris's pocket? Why was his body discovered in a condition not consistent with a fall from a height? And what role is played by a mysterious technical anomaly that seems to be linked to the disappearance of the hikers? After Harris's body was found, the rescue operation entered a new phase. The mysterious coordinates from his note pointed to a point 2 kilometers to the north, but it was impossible to get there using standard methods. The direct route was through a sheer rock wall more than 100 meters high. The detour required descending into the valley and ascending the opposite side of the massif, which increased the route to 8 to 10 kilometers. Marco Bellini decided to split the group. The main team of 8 rescuers started the traverse through the valley, while the technical team of 4 highly skilled climbers was tasked with traversing the rock wall directly. It was a risky decision. January conditions made rock climbing extremely dangerous, but time worked against the rescuers. The technical team encountered a problem already on the approach to the wall. GPS navigators refused to work steadily. Compasses showed the wrong direction. The climbers had to rely on visual reference points and their own experience of reading the terrain. In conditions of variable cloud cover and poor visibility, this turned the ascent into a blind game. By the evening of the 9th of January, the technical team reached the specified coordinates. The site revealed a small area of relatively flat terrain, protected from the wind by rock ledges. There were no traces of parking or presence of people, only a layer of untouched snow about half a meter thick. The detour team arrived at the same location on the morning of the 10th of January. A joint inspection of the area was inconclusive. There were no objects, traces, or indications as to why Harris had recorded these particular coordinates. The only peculiarity of the site was its complete silence. Not even the wind, which was constantly blowing across the surrounding slopes, could be heard. The search for Aziz Ziriat had to be conducted under conditions of constant technical failures. The anomaly zone, centered on where Harris's body had been found, continued to affect the electronic equipment. The rescuers were forced to develop a new tactic: work around the perimeter of the zone, periodically going inside for visual inspection and then going outside to re-establish communication with the base. By mid-January, it became clear that the search would last for a long time. No trace of Aziz Ziriat could be found, despite the use of additional resources: K9 teams, unmanned aerial vehicles, and thermal imaging equipment. Each day brought only new questions, but no answers. On the 11th of January, 3 days away from where Harris had found the first clue, in a crevice between rocks, about half a meter under the snow, lay a mobile phone case. A simple black silicone case with the logo of a London electronics shop. Relatives confirmed that Aziz had the same case. The find looked strange. The case was lying neatly, as if it had been put there and not dropped. The condition of the object did not correspond to a long stay under the snow. There were no signs of exposure to moisture or frost. Moreover, the case still contained crumbs from the energy bar, as if the phone had been taken out of it only recently. This discovery determined a new direction of search. Assuming that Ziriat had moved northwards from the last campsite, the cover could indicate his route. The rescuers began methodically combing the slope in a northerly direction from the point of discovery. February brought a second clue. 500 meters north of where the case was found, a glove was found under the roots of a stunted mountain pine. The right glove from the pair that friends said Aziz wore. Expensive German-made mountaineering gloves designed for extreme temperatures. The glove was dry and clean, with no trace of prolonged exposure to the cold. Inside the glove, there was the smell of hand cream, which, according to relatives, Ziriat had used. This fact amazed the rescuers. At a temperature of -15 to 20 degrees, any organic odors disappear within a few days. In March, another 800 meters to the north, a piece of climbing rope was found. It was about 3 meters long, neatly coiled and knotted. The rope was from the same set of equipment the British hikers had taken with them. The condition of the fibers indicated that the rope had been cut with a sharp object, possibly a knife. The April find was the most mysterious. A factory-packaged energy bar, which expired only in September of the year 2025. The packaging was intact, with no signs of weathering. Inside, the bar had retained its shape and consistency, as if it had just been pulled from a warm room. All the finds were located on a single line, leading strictly northwards from where Harris's body was found. The distance between them was between 500 and 800 meters. It seemed as if someone had methodically marked the route, leaving objects at regular intervals. By early May, the morale of the search team was approaching a critical point. 4 months of work in extreme conditions, constant technical failures, and lack of clarity in the case began to affect the rescuers' psyche. Especially depressing was a mysterious pattern related to weather conditions. Every time a detailed survey of the next discovery site was planned, a local blizzard started in the area. A snow wall up to 100 meters high covered the area where the rescuers were working, while the weather remained relatively clear within a 1.5 kilometer radius. 5 such occurrences were recorded during the search. The Trento Valley Meteorological Service could not explain this phenomenon. Localized snowstorms in the mountains do occur, but not with such precision, and not according to rescue plans. It seemed that nature was actively obstructing the investigation. The first incident occurred on the 12th of January, when the team was planning a detailed survey of the site where the cover was found. The weather was clear in the morning, with visibility exceeding 10 kilometers. At 11 o'clock in the morning, exactly when the work started, a dense snow curtain formed over the site. The wind increased to 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, and the temperature dropped by 8 to 10 degrees. The blizzard lasted exactly 6 hours. At 1700, the snowfall stopped as suddenly as it had started. But by that time, the site was covered with half a meter of fresh snow, and it was pointless to continue the search. A similar situation was repeated in February, March, April, and early May. Each time the snowstorm started, exactly at the time of the planned detailed inspection, and lasted exactly as long as necessary to make the work impossible. The rescuers began to joke that the mountain does not want to give up its secrets. But the jokes hid growing anxiety. Marco Bellini later admitted that by April he had serious doubts about the rationality of what was happening. 20 years of experience in alpine rescue operations had not prepared him for such a sequence of coincidences. A technical anomaly in the Carre Alto area, the strange state of the finds, the localized snowstorms on schedule. All of this went beyond the usual logic. Some team members began to avoid working in the central part of the anomalous zone. Luca Rossi, who had detected Harris's phone signal, admitted to colleagues that at certain points on the slope, he felt an inexplicable sense of anxiety. Other rescuers confirmed. In the center of the zone, there is a feeling of the presence of something extraneous, watching. A change in the group's mood occurred in mid-May when Bellini decided to systematize all the evidence found and try to find logic in it. On a map of the area, all the points of discovery were marked. A line was drawn connecting them, and distances and directions were calculated. The result was unexpected. All the objects found were located on a straight line leading from the place where Harris's body had been found to the north. The line passed through the coordinates written in his note and continued further, towards the inaccessible part of the northern slope of the massif. If we extrapolate this line, the next point should have been 1.5 kilometers north of the April discovery site. The area was a complex terrain of rocky ledges and deep crevices covered with perennial snow. It had not been surveyed in detail up to this point due to the technical difficulty of access. Bellini realized that all the items found might not be accidental losses, but deliberate signposts. It was as if Aziz Ziriath had methodically marked his path, leaving personal items at regular intervals. But then the question arose, where did this path lead? And why couldn't Ziriath just go back? On the 21st of May, an expedition was organized to the supposed next point on the line of evidence. A group of 6 experienced climbers was led by Bellini himself. The route was difficult, required the use of climbing equipment, and took a full day. The site to which the extrapolation of the line of finds led turned out to be a system of deep crevices in the rock massif. Some of them went tens of meters deep, forming natural wells and caves. Here, in one of these crevices, on the 24th of May, the canine service found a thermos belonging to Aziz Ziriat. The thermos lay at the bottom of a crevice about 20 meters deep, carefully placed against the rock wall. Next to it, a few meters away, was what the rescuers had been looking for all this time. But the circumstances of this final find raised as many questions as answers. What did the rescuers find in the deep crevice next to Ziriath's thermos? Why did all his personal belongings form a clear line leading to this place? And what role do the mysterious blizzards, which seem to protect the secrets of the mountain from prying eyes, play in what is happening? By the end of May 2025, the search and rescue operation in the Carre Alto area had become one of the longest in the modern history of the Italian Alps. Nearly 5 months of continuous work had exhausted not only the physical, but also the moral resources of all those involved. Equipment required constant repair and replacement, and people worked to the limit. The management of the Corpo Nazionale Soccorso Alpino has repeatedly raised the question whether the operation should continue on the same scale. Officially, the search for living people was called off back in February. Since March, the task of the rescuers has been to locate the body of Aziz Ziriat, to hand it over to the family and complete the formal procedures. The psychological pressure on the participants of the operation intensified from month to month. The mysterious circumstances of the case, a technical anomaly in the search area, strange weather phenomena, all this created an atmosphere far from normal rescue work. Some rescuers asked to be transferred to other regions, citing family circumstances. Marco Bellini later admitted that by May he had serious doubts about his own professional competence. In 20 years of work, he had been involved in hundreds of operations, but he had never encountered such a combination of technical problems and unexplained coincidences. Colleagues from other regions began to avoid traveling to the Dolomites, citing busyness. The families of the missing have had a particularly difficult time. Harris's death was confirmed, and his body was handed over to relatives for burial. But Ziriat's fate remained unclear. Rebecca Dimmick and Aziz's parents regularly flew to Italy, met with the search leadership, and demanded that the work continue. By mid-May, funding for the operation had been reduced to a minimum. Instead of a permanent team of 12 to 15 people, 4 to 5 rescuers worked in the area, traveling to the mountains 2 to 3 times a week. The use of helicopters was limited to cases of extreme necessity. Canine teams were used only when specific leads were identified. Public attention to the case was also fading. The Italian media switched to other events. The British press only occasionally published brief updates on the progress of the search. Social media, which in January-February was full of reports about missing tourists, had all but forgotten about the story by May. On Saturday, the 31st of May, 2025, an event occurred that both ended the search operation and opened new questions. A canine team led by Antonio Martini was working in the cleft system where the Ziriata thermos had previously been found. A dog named Rex, a German shepherd with 8 years of search experience, became very anxious at the entrance to one of the deep crevices. The animal's behavior indicated the discovery of human remains. The rescuers began to descend into the crevasse, which was about 25 meters deep. At the bottom of the stone well, in the northeastern part of the crevice, the body of Aziz Ziriat was found. The posture in which he was found immediately attracted the attention of all those involved in the operation. His right arm was outstretched and pointing strictly north. His left hand was clutching a GPS unit. His head was turned to the northern wall of the crevice, where an arrow, also pointing north, was scratched out about 1.5 meters above body level. The arrow was hollowed out in the rock with a sharp object, presumably an ice axe or a knife. The depth of the grooves was 2 or 3 millimeters. The length of the arrow was about 30 centimeters. Near the arrow, there were traces of other attempts to write or draw something, but most of the signs were illegible. The GPS unit in Ziriat's left hand appeared to be on, even though the battery should have been dead months ago. The coordinates displayed on the screen were 46.3156 degrees, north latitude, 11.093 degrees, east longitude. These coordinates pointed to a point 2 kilometers north of where the body had been found, in an area considered technically inaccessible by foot. The condition of the body and clothing was puzzling to the medical team. A prolonged stay in low temperatures would have been expected to cause some changes in the fabrics and structure of the clothing. Instead, the body was much better preserved than the medical team had anticipated. The clothes were dry, with no signs of prolonged exposure to moisture and frost. The preliminary medical examination revealed several anomalies. The time of death determined from the condition of the tissues did not correspond to the official date of disappearance. Calculations indicated that Death did not occur in early January, but much later, possibly in late January or early February. The stomach contained remnants of food that was not in the hiker's diet according to their hiking plans. Analysis showed the presence of plant components characteristic of spring alpine flora, which was under snow in January. This suggested that Ziriat had had access to food for a considerable time after the official date of disappearance. The condition of the skin and hair indicated prolonged exposure to low temperatures, but without critical hypothermia. The medical team could not explain how the body was able to sustain itself for weeks in sub-zero temperatures without adequate nutrition or shelter. The official report of the case was published in July of the year 2025. The cause of death of Samuel Harris and Aziz Ziriat was recognized as a fall from a height with subsequent hypothermia. The circumstances of the tragedy were classified as an accident due to unfavorable weather conditions and difficult terrain. The technical anomaly in the Car Alto area was categorized as a rare but known phenomenon related to the geological structure of the massif. The report mentioned possible magnetic anomalies in the rocks that could affect the operation of electronic equipment. However, many details of the case have not been convincingly explained. The condition of the bodies not corresponding to the supposed scenario of the fall. A mysterious sequence of finds of Ziriat's personal belongings forming a clear line. Localized snowstorms occurring precisely at the moments of planned, detailed surveys. The coordinates from Ziriat's GPS pointed to a point in an inaccessible area of the northern slope of the massif. The area was a system of deep gorges and steep cliffs, impossible to reach without special climbing equipment. What might have been there remains a mystery. Marco Bellini, who led the operation from day one, later admitted to journalists that in 20 years of working as a rescue worker, he had never encountered such a combination of unexplained circumstances. According to him, every clue found raised new questions instead of clarifying the picture of what had happened. The families of the victims expressed their gratitude to all those involved in the search operation. Harris's relatives organized a fundraiser for the Alpine Rescue Service of Italy. The Palace for Life Foundation established the Aziz Ziriat Scholarship for young people from disadvantaged neighborhoods in London. But questions remain. Why did experienced tourists with modern equipment die in relatively favorable conditions? What does a technical anomaly in the area of their deaths mean? Was it an accident that localized snowstorms prevented a detailed study of the tragedy site? And the main question that continues to bother everyone who is familiar with the details of the case: what is at the coordinates 46.31 north, 56 degrees north, 11.0923 degrees east? Why did Aziz Ziriat, in the last minutes of his life, try with such insistence to point there? In May of 2026, exactly 1 year after the search was completed, a mountaineering expedition from Austria planned a technically challenging ascent to the mysterious coordinates. However, a week before the start of the expedition, a powerful avalanche struck in the Car Alto area, making access to the northern slope impossible for years to come. Nature, it seems, continues to keep its secrets, and the question of what Aziz Ziriat was trying to tell the world remains unanswered. Perhaps some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Perhaps the Car Alto mountains hide something that mankind is not yet ready to understand. The silence of the Dolomites still holds its secrets. And maybe it's for the best. The official documents of the case are in the archives of the Corpo Nazionale Soccorso Alpino Service. Special authorization is required to consult the materials. The Car Alto area remains open to climbers, but a technical anomaly in the search area continues to affect the operation of electronic equipment. The memory of Samuel Harris and Aziz Ziriat is commemorated in a plaque on the wall of Casina Dawson's hut. The inscription reads, in memory of two friends who went into the mountains in search of beauty and found eternity.